Final Frontier again on this Sunday with some very, very reasonably priced coffee, £1.60 for an Americano, and some wonderful hard bop records in there, but I haven't got a working turntable at the moment. Now, this is kind of my Sundays. I do therapy on Sunday afternoons. You know, it's not a complete day off for me, and it does me a lot of good. It does me a lot of good. It's one of these sort of semi-official little things we patients do, and a lot of people are saying to me, Julia, why do you talk about your illness on here? You shouldn't. It looks bad, it puts you down, but that's the problem. I know so many people, particularly with depression, and people with really, really, really bad problems with depression. And they're good people, they're not Muppets. Everybody has this view, oh, they're comedy Muppets who run around town. No, they're not. I know highly intelligent, very capable people whose lives are being, or otherwise very capable people, whose lives are being shredded by depression, by anxiety attacks, and because of the stigma, no one will talk about it, so all people think was, oh, it's Muppets, or the rubbish you see on television, like EastEnders. I mean, that's become people's, you know, oh, but they brought up the subject very sensitively 30 years ago with Arthur Fowler. Yes, but they made it look ridiculous. It was pantomime. I'm sorry, that is not, 90% of the time, that's not what it's like. So I'm not going to be frightened to talk about being ill and the measures I have to take, and other people do who are ill. My Americano has arrived now, and I must say, it's scrummy. I'm sitting here in Eastbourne's Little Chelsea, and Eastbourne is a little bit more fun at the moment because Lil-Anne Chepstow-Lusty is here, who amongst other things edits the Eastbourne Times website. And I just find Eastbourne more fun when Lil-Anne's here. She grew up here in the 70s, and it perhaps had a bit more of its eccentricness about it, and she's kind of very into Eastbourne. Have a look at Eastbourne Times, it's very interesting. Perhaps we'll be talking to her at some point. Something that worries both me and I think Lil-Anne, because we were talking last night after I got back from Brighton, is how alternative communities are becoming as repressive as the mainstream. Now, to an extent, this has always been the case. I mean, it wasn't easy to be a hippie with short hair, for instance. Whatever happened to hippies with alopecia? They must have had a hard time, or wigs, because we all know that when you kind of drop out the mainstream, you form your own alternative community, and guess what? It becomes as repressive as the mainstream. If you've seen the wonderful Tony Hancock comedy from 1960, The Rebel, the Parisian beatniks in that, imagine everyone looking exactly the same, which of course the Parisian beatniks do in the film. Very funny film, you should see it. Great send-up of the counterculture and long before hippies. But I find now that an awful lot of people who are kind of alternative minded, a lot of those scenes now, they're more opened up, especially with the LGBT. There's a lot of people who've kind of bought status. You find a lot of people came out late in life. I didn't. Like Lil-Anne, I came out sort of very young, in my teens, and you live differently. It's not, oh, that's a sympathy ploy, you suffered. It's not about that. It's the fact that you don't have these mainstream experiences. You know, you haven't, oh, well, we all did that at 17. No, I sat in a room and listened to Wagner and was very miserable at 17. You know, it's not, I was an emo 30 years before there were emos. And it's different, it makes you different. And what you find in alternative communities now, especially LGBT, is all kinds of people decide to come out in middle age, having gained a lot of money and status, and they tend to use it within their new community. Now, I'm really not putting people down or being an inverted snob, and this is not the politics of jealousy, because thank God for those people. They're very often the lifeblood of the scene, and they get a lot of stuff doing, and a lot of them are good people, but some of them are bad people. And they will use their status. They come into a community where there's often very vulnerable people, often a bit younger than them, and they will just, I've got money, I've got status, I'm something in the straight world, therefore, you know? I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, straight woman, and she'd had some experiences. She lives in another part of the UK, and she'd had some bad experiences with local gay men that she knew. For the first time in her life, it's like, I've known gay men for 20 years, 25 years, and basically she thought they were all nice, you know? And what shocked her, apart from the sheer viciousness of one man's treatment of the other, was the snobbery involved. And she was like, I didn't know there was class prejudice amongst gay men. I mean, it's like, you didn't know there was racism in Alabama. There's chronic bloody class, and why shouldn't there be, all right? Gay people are people just like everybody else and have all the same sort of prejudices. But she was absolutely shocked that class prejudice was a problem between gays, and it is. It's as prevalent as it is anywhere else in society. And she was horrified that we could be selfish, but you always stick together. No, we don't. We're crap at sticking together. Historically, we've been one of the worst groups for sticking together. We are a bit better now, thank God. But, there's this kind of... People are very strange about how those communities work. It's still the real world, love. You've still got to deal with people as people, regardless of how they define their sexuality or their gender. Genre, I nearly said. I'm not a gender, I'm a genre. Genre dysphoria. Interesting concept. Oh, and another bit of Julia's advice for sort of surviving in alternative communities, particularly alternative sexualities, is look out for tourists. Obviously, in any scene like that, there are a certain number of people who are there to look at the animals in the zoo. And generally, they're pretty harmless. I don't mind people doing that. These kind of weekend people who, buy some alternative-looking clothes and go to an LGBT venue when they're not really LGBT, or get involved in stuff like that. Again, I am not faulting people. This is not me being a bitch about authenticity or being the real deal. But sometimes, because it's only their play world, it's a bit like white South Africans when they used to go to that place, what was it called, Sun City? I think it was in one of the little sort of South African protectorates. And people could do all the things that they weren't allowed to do in the Republic of South Africa because of the influence of the Dutch Reformed Church. So they would gamble, and I think there was a lot of prostitution and excessive drinking and stuff. And you sometimes find people with nice jobs, kids, respectable life, and they'll come down into they'll go to places like fetish clubs or goth clubs or things like that, and then they've got no responsibility towards the people in those clubs, in those environments. As far as they're concerned, they're there to play. That social scene is their playland, it's their play world. And unfortunately, the people who are there are their play people, they're toy people, and they can play with them how they like, and they can sod off at the end of the weekend, and on Monday they're in totally different clothes, totally different makeup, in the office, planning some kind of meeting, and the poor little sod they've screwed over is, down the pan, but they don't care, because that person isn't a real person like them, that's just someone they met, well, very often on the gay scene, or it's someone we met on the gay scene, it's not a real person. Yes, it's a real person, and I have to be around these people, they're my community. I try not to do it anymore, but because of who I am, I often used to feel that I had to pick up the pieces afterwards, and it really makes me stop, badly, this kind of, I'm a tourist, I went down there for a weekend, I screwed somebody over, usually it involves sex or drugs, and I don't care what happened, they're just play people. Sometimes you'll go to clubs, I don't anymore, I'm not really a club person anymore, but I used to years and years ago, and you'd get people, I used to work in hotels, like a lot of gay men of my generation, hotels, that's what you did, you cut hair, you did nursing, or you did catering, and the guests treat you a certain way, and of course they do, they're paying for it, and actually a lot of the time they're not that well off, that's their week a year, they want to be special, so I don't mind it, it's paid work, it's entertainment, no different from being an actor. I always used to say, catering is not just food and accommodation, it's show business, we were taught that. But you would often find these people at venues, and all the, like the straight off the shelf Hell Bunny outfits and everything, or the guy's got big bloody great Demona boots he just bought yesterday, and they would talk to you like you're a member of staff, and I'm thinking, I'm another customer, right? I paid to get into this club, same as you, I paid for a drink, the same as you, and you're talking to me like I work here, because I'm a, quote, real LGBT person, and you're just helping them out for the weekend. And their attitude was just really dreadful, and I think, apart from the fact I'm past it, and money, obviously is the big one, that's one of the reasons I don't club anymore. It's those people can be really unpleasant, and if you're in a position where you're vulnerable to them, watch out for them. Tourists can actually be dangerous, you know. Not saying they all are, but some tourists in those kind of scenes are bloody dangerous.